Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. The holidays have been a little bit crazy and it's taken me a minute to recover, but now that I'm getting back into things, I just am so excited to share my latest pattern with you. Not only are these little bears just so adorable, I mean look at those faces, they also have magnets in their noses, so they are kissing bears. And I love how you can just put them together and they stay there. They're so much fun, the perfect gift or make for Valentine's Day coming up, or really any time of the year. So let's go ahead and jump right in. This is a low sew pattern. There's a little bit of sewing involved with the snout and the ears, but the rest of it is all crocheted as you go. And as long as you know a few basic crochet stitches, you are ready to do this tutorial. For this tutorial, you're going to need two different sizes of yarn. For the main body, I'm going to be using this, which is a Big Twist Plush yarn, which was previously available at Joann's. That if you can't find that anymore, or if you don't have that, there's a lot of other options that are similar. Michael's has one called Posh Pearl or Cozy Cup that's very similar. Premier Parfait Chunky is similar. Kayla's Naughty Ball would work also. Now keep in mind, if you do use a bigger yarn than this, your overall teddy bear will be bigger, but the snout will not. So the proportions will be a little bit different. Just to give an idea, like if you use blanket yarn, which is what this is on the left here, that's how much bigger it is. It will end up with a little bit different proportions. But when I make the written pattern that will be available on my Etsy, I will have a modified snout pattern for if you are using thicker yarn. And then for the snout, you need to use a really skinny yarn. Now I'm using, this one is actually Bernat Future, which is just a really tiny skinny chenille yarn. You can see in comparison, it's maybe about half the size of this other one. And if you don't have a really skinny chenille yarn, you can also just use regular worsted weight acrylic yarn. You can see it's about the same size as just regular acrylic yarn. If you use thicker yarn than that, the magnetic action won't work as well because the magnets aren't strong enough to go through thicker yarn. There's a couple other options at Michael's that are very similar to this that would work also. They're Loops and Threads Petite Pearl, or they have one called Skinny Chenille, actually, that is just almost identical to this. So those would both work. And then you're going to need two different crochet hooks to correspond with these two different sizes of yarn. And that will vary depending on your tension and the yarn that you're using. My bigger one here that I'm using is a 3.75. And my smaller one that I'm using is a 3.25. You're also going to need scissors, a yarn needle, some stitch markers. I'm using 10mm, just plain black safety eyes, but you can use whatever your preference is, some stuffing, and of course a magnet. Now the magnet that you use for this is really important. I've had several trial and error things with the magnets trying to figure out one that would work. You need to make sure that you have a super strong little magnet. And what I've found is you need a neodymium magnet, which are really strong, but not just any neodymium will work. You need the highest grade, which is N52. So when you're doing your research, make sure you look for N52 neodymium. And this is a 1/2 inch by 1/4 inch. And you can do different sizes than this if you want, but the bigger you get, the more expensive they get. So I can put a link to the ones that I got on Amazon. You might want to, before you get started, if you make two separate snouts to start, and then you put a magnet on either side of it, and just make sure that the magnetic power is strong enough through 2 layers of your yarn that it will work. That way you won't get all the way done with your project and realize that it doesn't work because the magnet's not strong enough. So that's what we need, and we're ready to get started. We're going to start with the snout on our bear, or the muzzle, and we're going to start by making a slip knot in our yarn. And again, I'm using this really skinny chenille, but you could also use the acrylic yarn for just this part, even if you want to do a plush for the rest. So I've got my slip knot on there, and I'm going to chain 5 to start. And once I've chained 5, I'm going to go into the second chain from the hook right there, and I'm going to make a single crochet. And I like to mark that as the first stitch of my round right there. So I'll put my stitch marker in that. And now I've got 3 more stitches here, and I'm going to single crochet in the next 2. This is pretty tiny, so it's sometimes slow going getting into the right stitches here. Now when I have 1 left, I'm going to do 3 single crochets all in that last stitch. And I can work on both sides of the knot here. I usually put the first one on this side of the knot, and then I turn around and still working in that last stitch, but on the other side of the knot I put the other 2. So there's my first one. And then going on the other side of the knot here, going to do 2 more. Now working on the second side of the chain here, I'm going to single crochet in the next 2 stitches. Getting into these little tiny stitches can sometimes be a little tricky. Okay, and then I will increase in my last stitch, and I still have the turning chain at the end here from the extra chain when I turned to come back here. So there's still that. We're not going to work into that on this piece. When we do the feet later, we are actually going to work into that turning chain. But I just increased in that last stitch before the turning chain, and now I have 10 stitches. That's the end of that round. For round 2, we're going to start with an increase. I'll put my stitch marker back in here. The second stitch in my increase. Then I'm going to single crochet in the next 2. Now I'm going to do 3 increases around the end. So there's 1 increase, 2 increase, and 3 increase. Okay, now I'm going to single crochet in the next 2 again, and that should leave 2 stitches left here. I'm going to increase in both of those. 1 increase and 2 increase. And now we have 16 stitches in that round. For round 3, I'm going to do a pattern of single crochet 3 and an increase, and I'll repeat that pattern 4 times around so that I have a total of 20 stitches at the end of this round. That is the end of round 3, and for our final round of the snout, we are just going to single crochet all the way around. That will be 20 stitches. Once you've single crocheted all the way around on round 4, we are just going to do a slip stitch in the next stitch, and we're going to cut it with a long tail for sewing this on later, and then just finish off. You can go ahead and pull that through, and there you have your little snout. Next, we're going to move on to the arms. To start the arms, we're going to single crochet 8 into a magic ring. And for round 2 of the arms, we are going to increase all the way around. I will stop there to put my stitch marker in. And then we're just going to do an increase in each stitch. 8 increases, so we will end this round with 16 stitches. Rounds 3 and 4, for both of them, we are just going to single crochet all the way around. A total of 16 stitches in each round. For round 5, we're going to do a pattern of 2 single crochets and a decrease, repeated all the way around 4 times, so we'll have 12 stitches at the end of this round. There was my first single crochet, second one, and now a decrease. I'm doing an invisible decrease, of course, and then just repeat that. Round 6, we are going to single crochet around again, 12 stitches in total. Round 7, I'm going to do just 1 single crochet and then a decrease, and repeat that pattern around. So we will have 8 stitches at the end of this round. Before we go any further here, after round 7, I like to add just a little bit of stuffing. You could even do it before the previous round, I guess, if you wanted to make it a little easier. And I don't stuff the whole arm, I really just stuff the end of it a little bit. And you don't need very much, and you don't even need to come all the way up to the top here, maybe just to round 5 to 6 or so, just a little ball of stuffing right in the end there before we continue on. After you've done that for round 8 and 9, rounds 8 and 9, we're just going to single crochet around. That's 8 stitches in each round. For round 10, we're going to do a pattern single crochet 2 and a decrease, and then we will repeat that. So there's my second one and a decrease. When we get to the end of this round, we will only have 6 stitches left. Now to finish off the final part of this arm, we are just going to flatten it at the top, kind of fold it in half flat, take this stitch marker out, and we had 6 stitches in this round, so we're just going to go, with it flattened, we're going to go through both sides, so through that first one and through the one on the other side there, and complete a single crochet, and we'll just do 3 single crochets across the top here to close it off. And there you have your first arm. I'm going to cut the yarn on this. I don't need it very long because I'm not going to be sewing it on. I do leave maybe just 4 inches or so because I like to tie the 2 arms together inside the bear, but I'll show you how I do that when I get there. And now you can just finish it off by pulling it through there. Go ahead and make a second arm, and then we'll be ready to move on to the legs and the body. We're going to move on to the feet now, and again we're going to start with a slip knot on our hook, and we will chain 5 just like we did when we started the snout. And going in the second chain from the hook, we will place a single crochet and mark that as the first stitch of our round. And then we're going to single crochet in the next 2. There's 1 and 2, and that leaves just 1 stitch left. If you remember when we did the snout, we did 3 stitches in this last stitch, and I did 1 on the first side and 2 on the second side to add up to 3. This time we're going to do 4, so we're going to do 2 on each side of that knot in the very last stitch. So here is the first one and 2 on the first side of that last stitch, and then I'm going to go on the other side of the knot and do 2 more. 1 and 2. Now I'm going to single crochet in the next 2, and I should have 1 stitch plus my turning chain left. I'm going to do an increase in that next stitch, which leaves just my turning chain, and I'm actually going to do a stitch into that turning chain, just another single crochet into that turning chain, so that I will end that round with 12 stitches. On this next round, we're going to start by increasing. There's the first stitch of my increase, and the second stitch of my increase. My hook just doesn't want to stay in there right now. Okay, now we're going to single crochet in the next 2. And now we're coming to the end here. We're going to increase 4 times around the end. There's 1 increase, 2 increase, 3 increase, and 4 increase. Now I'm going to single crochet in the next 2, and then I will end these last 3 stitches doing increases, 3 increases. That's the first one, 2 increase, and 3 increase. And we end that round with 20 stitches around. For the next round, round 3, we're just going to do single crochets around, but we're going to do it in the back loops only. So there's 2 loops for each stitch, the front loop and the back loop, and we are just going to go through the back one and single crochet around. For round 4, we're just going to single crochet around, this time going through both loops, just a normal single crochet, and again we will have 20 stitches. For round 5, we're going to start with 3 single crochets. That was my first one, 2, 3, and now we're going to do 6 decreases. This is the part where we're starting to make the shape of the foot. There's my second decrease. 3, 4, 5, and one more. That was 6 decreases, and then I have 5 more single crochets to finish the round. That brings our stitch count down to 14 on round 5. For round 6, we're going to start with 4 single crochets. And then we'll follow that with 2 decreases. Here's the first one and the second one, and then we'll end the round with 6 more single crochets. And our stitch count on round 6 is down to 12. For round 7, we will just single crochet around and still have 12 stitches. Okay, if this is your first foot that you're doing, then what we're going to do here is skip the next stitch and do a slip stitch in the one following that. Kind of pull that a little bit tight and cut this off. It doesn't need to be long at all. It can be very short, and pull that through. And if this is your second foot, we're not going to finish it off like that. You'll finish round 7 with the 12 single crochets, and then we will continue to attach the 2 feet. So you go ahead and make another foot just like that, except stop there without finishing it off. I've just finished round 7 of my second foot, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to single crochet 2 to get to about the middle of the side of this foot, maybe just slightly before the middle. And that might vary depending on your crochet tension and just the style of how you crochet. You might need to do more or less than 2, but for me, I need to do 2 to get to right about the middle of the side of that foot. And then I'm going to chain 1. And if you haven't done a lot of connecting limbs before with this method with the chain between, it could be helpful to put a stitch marker on either side of your chain here. So I just did, here I'll take my hook out to make it a little easier. I just did that 1 chain stitch after my single crochets. I'm going to put a yellow stitch marker on one side and a purple stitch marker on the other side, and that will just help be able to tell what stitches I'm supposed to be going into when I come back around. Now after I do that chain 1, I'm going to grab my first foot that I made, and I'm going to want to go into just the stitch that's right in the middle on the side of this foot. So that's right there. I'm going to go in and I will make a single crochet there, and I am going to mark that as my first stitch of round 8. And I'm going to use this blue stitch marker. So if you have different colors, it can be helpful to remember that when you come around that you used the blue one, and that's the beginning of your round. So after I make that first single crochet, I'm going to do 10 more around this foot. And that brings me back to the beginning right here. Now what I'm going to do next, I've got these 2 stitches marked as the side of this chain, and a lot of times when people are connecting 2 pieces like this, they will just go ahead and do the next single crochet into the side of that chain, but that tends to leave a hole right here, and you have to go back and sew it up afterwards, which I really don't like doing. So to avoid that, what I'm going to do is like an invisible decrease, but instead of going into the top of the next stitch, I'm going to go into, it's actually just the side of this first stitch of the round right here. It's basically just halfway between where I am and this next stitch that I want to go into. So I'm just going to go into the side of that, just like I was doing an invisible decrease. That would be like my first loop. And then for the second part of the decrease, I'm going to go into this chain stitch where I had my stitch marker. If I can get it in there, sometimes it's a little bit tight. So then I've got the 2 loops on my hook, just like an invisible decrease. Then I pull up a loop and yarn over and pull through again. So that's that decrease. Now I'm going to do the same kind of thing again for this next stitch, again to avoid holes. If you look, this right here is the next stitch on this foot, and so I'm going to go into the side of this stitch right here as like the first part of my decrease, and then into that stitch and complete it like a regular decrease. And that way I'm not going to have any holes that I need to go back and sew through when I'm done here. So after that, those 2 decreases, now I've got 10 single crochets around this foot. And that should bring me back to my chain stitch here on the other side. And I am going to just do another single crochet into the other side of that chain stitch, and that will complete my round. I should have a total of 26 stitches there. On my next round, I'm going to start by single crocheting almost all the way around, but not quite. So I will do 24 single crochets to start. Okay, and after I've done 24 single crochets, then I have 2 stitches left and I'm going to do an increase. And a single crochet. So I only had 1 increase in that round and I will end with 27 stitches. We are now on round 10 and we're going to start with an increase. This should be kind of making the back symmetrical. We ended our last round with an increase and then a single crochet, and that single crochet should be right in the middle in the back, and then there's an increase on either side of it. So after you do that increase, we're going to single crochet 10. And that should bring you around pretty close to the front. We're going to increase in the next 4 stitches right here. And if you look at yours and those next 4 stitches are not centered across the middle there, then you'll want to adjust it a little bit to the left or right so that we have 4 increases centered in the front here. This is going to kind of make the little belly of the bear. There's my first increase. 2, 3, and 1 more increase. And after that increase, we're going to single crochet 12 to get around to the back. And that is round 10. We should have 32 stitches in our round now. For this next round, again, we're going to single crochet almost all the way around. We're going to do 31 stitches, and then in the very last stitch, we're going to do a bobble stitch, and that will help, that will make our tail. Okay, I've finished 31 stitches in round 11, and you're going to want to look again to make sure that this is centered in the back. You may need to put your bobble stitch at the beginning, the very first stitch where your stitch marker is, or at the end of this round. The bobble stitch does tend to start here and go a little bit to the left, so I'm going to put it in as my last stitch here on round 11, but adjust that as needed so that it's centered. And we are going to do this bobble with 6 incomplete double crochets. So we will, I've already done it once, but yarn over, go through, pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through 2. You're going to do that a total of 6 times, and you'll end up with 7 loops on your hook before you pull them all the way through. And count, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 loops there. And so I will yarn over and pull through all 7 at the same time. Now when I'm doing bobble stitches, I like to keep them inside out when I go to the next stitch. It helps me make this next one tighter and closer so that there's not a hole after the bobble stitch. So I'm just going to do a single crochet there, and that would be the first stitch of my new round because I did the bobble as the last stitch. And again, I'm just going to single crochet all the way around on this round, round 12, and I will again have 32 stitches. Before I start round 13, I just want to look at this and make sure that the tail looks centered on the back there, and if it does, then I'm good to go ahead and move on. For round 13, we're going to do a pattern of single crochet 6 and a decrease, and we'll do that 4 times around on this round. That was 6, so I will do my first decrease here. Here's my second decrease, and I'll repeat that pattern 2 more times. With those decreases, I'm down to 28 stitches in a round, and for round 14, I will again single crochet around. Right around here is where we want to start stuffing, and then we will continue to stuff as we go. And when you add the stuffing, you want to make sure that you get it all the way down in the foot here and into the toe, but you don't want to stuff the foot so tightly that the bottom isn't still kind of flat. So you just kind of have to find a good balance there between making sure it's pretty well stuffed but not overstuffed. And you can stuff the legs a little bit more solidly than the bottom of the foot if you want to. It might help him stand up a little bit. You don't need to stuff all the way up to the top where you are yet. We'll just continue to stuff as we go, but we do want to get some stuffing down in those legs before we get too far up here. Okay, we are now on round 15. We ended our last round with 28 stitches around, and this time we're going to start with 3 single crochets, and then a decrease. And then we will do 5 single crochets, and another decrease, and we'll repeat that 2 more times. So the 5 single crochets and a decrease is what we will repeat again. And then that and the last time of that pattern. And after this last decrease, we should have 2 more stitches in the round to single crochet. So we have 24 in this round, and the next round 16 we're just going to single crochet around again. We have 1 more round before we start adding our arms. This is round 17, and we're going to do a pattern of single crochet decrease, repeated 8 times around so that it brings our stitch count down to 16. Okay, we are on round 18, which is where we're going to attach the arms. But before we do that, I'm going to add a little bit more stuffing here. Fill in the belly part a little bit. Make sure your legs are pretty tightly packed in there. Get some in the belly. We'll still be able to add more even once we've got the head on through the neck, but it's just a little easier to do it as you go. Okay, and we are ready to attach the arms. And you might need to adjust them a little bit left or right, just based on your crochet tension and style. They might be a little off from what I'm doing, but where I put them is I start this round with 4 single crochets, and then I'll do my first arm. So there was my first 1, 2, 3, 4, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my first arm, and on this first one I'm going to put it here. I want this tail where I ended to be on the left side, and when I do the next one I'm going to go opposite. And remember, we finished with 3 single crochets across the top, so I'm just going to go into the first one and then into the next stitch on the body. Oops, let's try that one more time. And just do that with each one. Go into the next single crochet on the arm, the next one on the body, and complete a single crochet. And 3rd time. Complete a single crochet. And after you do that 3rd one, you're going to want to grab this tail end from your arm and make sure that it comes inside so that you're going over it as you continue to crochet around. And I'm going to do 4 single crochets between the arms, and then I will grab the other one to attach as well. And this one I'm going to start with my tail on the right side. So I'm going to line it up there and go through the first one. I'm going to put this tail end under my working yarn here to bring it to the inside. sorry, under my working yarn and bring it on the inside there. So I went through the first single crochet on the top of the arm, and I'll go through the next stitch in the body and complete a single crochet. Sorry, I'm getting my strings mixed up here. There we go. And of course my hook came off. Sorry, I'm struggling with this one for some reason. There we go. And then the next single crochet on the arm, the next one on the body, and the last one on the arm, and the next one on the body. And you should just have 2 single crochets left to finish that round. And you should have 16 again in that round. So this is where you're going to want to look at it and make sure that your arms are centered. You can kind of look from the top and see if they look like they're kind of crooked, like going like that rather than centered. You can adjust them one way or the other, left or right. But if they look good, we can go ahead and continue. For round 19, we're going to start increasing again to make the head. And we're going to do that by a pattern of 1 single crochet and an increase 8 times around. So we will end this round with 24 stitches. One thing that I like to do when I have crocheted on arms like this is come back and grab these ends and tie them together. You don't have to do this, but on this end, sometimes like it can pull out just a little bit here and just make a little bit of a bump right there. And it's not, I mean, it's not terrible. It's not going to come out that far, but I like to tie them together and pull them just snug enough that that won't happen. You don't want to cinch it up too tight, but you just pull it just barely a little snug, tie them together, and that will keep those from coming out and making that little bump right there. So that is optional, but I like to do it, and we're ready to move on to round 20, where we are going to do 2 single crochets and an increase, and repeat that pattern 8 times around so that we will have 32 at the end of this round. We're now on round 21. This is the last round where we're going to continue to increase. And for this round, we're going to do 7 single crochets and an increase, and then repeat that pattern 4 times around. Okay, for the next 6 rounds, rounds 22 through 27, we are just going to single crochet around. There'll be a total of 36 stitches in each round for 6 rounds. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I will meet you back here. Now that I've completed those 6 rounds of just single crocheting, I'm on round 28, and I'm going to do the opposite pattern of how I increased on the head. So this round I will single crochet 7 and decrease, and repeat that 4 times around. I finished round 28 with 32 stitches. For round 29, I'm going to do a pattern of single crochet 2 and then decrease, and I will repeat that 8 times around. So I will end this round with 24 stitches. After round 29 is where we're going to stop and add the snout and the eyes. And we want to put it on between about rows 21 to 25. So this last one that we did was row 29. So if you count down from there, 28, 27, 26, this is row 25. So the top of your snout is going to be just come up to the top of row 29 here, and 25. And then continuing down 24, 23, 22, 21, the bottom of your snout will line up with the bottom of row 21 right there. So it's a little bit oblong, so make sure that you have it across the way that it goes, not crooked here. And you're going to want to center it, look at it and center it, so with the arms and the legs. And if you want to use something to pin it in place as you sew, you can do that. I usually just kind of hold it here because it's not stuffed yet. We are going to stuff it and put the magnet in once we get to about here, going around this way. But I'm just gonna start sewing here. So I'm gonna go down in a stitch and then come back up and go through the top of an outside stitch here. And just do that all the way around. And if you don't have it pinned exactly in place, it's a good idea to stop every couple stitches and make sure that it's still lined up where you want it to go. Oh, I sewed around an arm there. Okay, before I finish, now that I'm most of the way around here, I have a little bit of a hole there. This is where I'm going to put in first the magnet and then some stuffing. So I have my magnet here. If you've gotten the magnets I recommended, and if you have magnets that are strong enough to go through this yarn, you'll find that they can be a little bit tricky to work with because they stick together and it's really hard to get them apart. But what I like to do first is I put it inside and I put it kind of on the middle, right in the middle, and then I just put another one on there, and that will hold that in place inside there while I add some stuffing around it. And putting the stuffing in there will kind of help hold it in place. Make sure you've got some down below it so it doesn't just fall to the bottom. And then once you've got that stuffing and the magnet in there, then you can go ahead and finish sewing around. And once you're done, you can tie that off inside, and then we'll add the eyes. Once you have the snout sewn on, you're ready to put the eyes in, and you can choose, you can either put them between rows 24 and 25, which is kind of down a little bit lower to the side of the snout like that, or you can put them up just a little bit like this, so they're kind of above the snout. And it also depends on how you've sewn your snout on. It might be a little bit higher or lower, so just experiment with the placement. That right there is between rows 25 and 26, and I think that's what I'm going to go with on mine. But whatever you decide works best for yours, you can put them there and snap the backs on. And then we're ready to continue on with the head. We are on round 30 actually. We ended the last round with 24 stitches, and for round 30 we're going to do a pattern of single crochet, decrease around 8 times, so we'll end with 16. I almost forgot that we also need to embroider his nose on here before we close him up, so I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. And just another side note quick, if you're making two bears that you have the magnets in and you want them to be kissing, you want to make sure that the magnets are placed in the correct direction so that they actually will go together rather than repel each other. Like these two are opposites and they don't want to go together. I can feel them, they just repel each other and won't go. So make sure your magnets are the correct way so that it works right when you're doing your second one. Now to embroider the nose, we're going to go, I'm using a little bit thicker yarn. This is burnout blanket yarn. And I'm going to go from inside the head, and you won't be able to go right through where the magnet is, but I go kind of towards the top of this white part. You don't want it to be in front of the magnet because you don't want anything, you don't want it thicker there to make it harder for the magnets to attract each other. But kind of towards the top and over towards the eye, below one eye, and you will pull that so there's long enough to tie to there, and then I go across to this other side here just down from that eye, and I'm going to go through a couple times there and just pull that tight. You can do it however many times you want. I think I'll probably just do 2. You could just do 1 if you want. It might depend on how thick your yarn is too, but just go until you get the look you want and then go back out the back again. like that. And there he has a nose, and I can just go ahead and tie these two together inside. And it probably would have been easier to embroider this nose one row earlier before I did that last round of crocheting. I just almost forgot, so there we go. Tied that off. I'm going to cut that off shorter. Okay, and next I'm going to add some stuffing to the head here. And you can kind of continue to stuff as you go if you need to add more. You're going to want to make sure that you get plenty of stuffing down in the neck so that he doesn't have a floppy head. He's not too big, so it's not that big of an issue, but you just want to make sure that he's not flopping around. And once you have got his head stuffed, we're going to go ahead and move on to the last round. We just did round 30 where we ended with 16 stitches, and this is the last round 31 where we are just going to do 8 decreases around. Once you have done those 8 decreases, you can go ahead and cut your yarn off. You leave a little bit of a tail for finishing it off, and we're going to do what's called the ultimate finish. So we will pull this yarn through our last stitch there, and we're going to thread it onto a yarn needle. And then we're just going to go up through the front loop only of each stitch around. Once you've done that, you can cinch it closed. Just pull on it gently to tighten that up. Close that hole up, and then you can hide your ends. And I like to tie a little knot here. I know not everybody does that, but I'm always paranoid about things coming loose. Go through to another spot. Then you can either cut that off or you can just pull it down inside. And there is our cute little earless bear. We just need to add ears and then he'll be done. To make the ears, we're going to start with a magic ring again and single crochet 8 into that magic ring. And for the second round, we will increase around 8 increases and end with 16 stitches. For rounds 3 and 4, We are just going to single crochet all the way around. And for the last round of these ears, we are going to decrease, well, we're going to do two single crochets and then a decrease, and we will repeat that 4 times around and end this round with 12 stitches. That was my first decrease. Here's my second, and I just continue that pattern. 1, 2, decrease, and the last time, 1, 2, decrease. Okay, we're not going to stuff these ears. Instead, what we're going to do is flatten them. If you remember, we just finished that round with 12 single crochets. We're going to flatten them and slip stitch 6 across here through both layers. So I will go into my next stitch and then back into this first one of the round and just slip stitch and keep these slip stitches pretty tight. That one does not want to come through. There we go. There's 1, 2, and if you need to kind of pull them tight after each one, you can. 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we're going to leave a long enough tail to sew it on, and we will cut that and just pull it through to finish off. And we're going to make 2 of those ears, and I like to kind of flatten them and shape them a little bit like that, so they're kind of a little bit of a bowl shape. And I do them opposite from each other, so for one of them, the tail will be coming down on this side, and then for the next one, I'm gonna kind of flatten it and have it shaped that way with the tail coming down on this side, on the bottom. Now that I've made 2 ears, all I have to do is sew them on and he will be done. And as I said earlier, I like to have the tails coming out the bottom of both sides so that when I sew them on, I start at the bottom and sew up to the top, and then I like to tie the ends together inside. So we are going to sew them on kind of, you can choose where you want to put them, but I kind of like them a little bit farther down on the sides rather than up towards the top, but that's just personal preference. So I usually put it between about rows 25 to 29-ish, which is about right there. And as far as how far back, it's pretty close to halfway. If you drew a line straight across the middle of the head, halfway. But you can experiment with different placements and see what you like best. And I like to do it in a little bit of a curve shape rather than having it straight like that. I kind of curve it to make this little C and have it curved towards the front. So once you've got it where you want it, then you can just start sewing it on. I can show you how I start that. And again, you can, if you'd like to pin it or secure it in place somehow before you start sewing, you can, but I usually don't for this. I will just go through a stitch right around where I want the bottom to be, like that. And then I'm gonna go back through the bottom of that And from there, I just kind of go, I usually will go up and down like this, go through a stitch this way, maybe back a little bit this way. Oh, here I'm struggling again. I think I might have left my tails just a little bit shorter than would have been ideal for sewing on, but that's okay, it'll work. Okay, so I went up through a stitch that way, and then I'm gonna go back through to the back here, and then do the same thing. Go through a stitch up and down this way, and just continue that until your ear is sewn on. Back through to the front, go through a stitch up and down, like that, to the back again. And as you can see, it's kind of, right now it's kind of pointing towards the back, but I'm gonna bring this top part back to the front so it's in that curve shape when I secure the top. So I will go ahead and finish this one and sew the other one on and then show you how I finish it. Okay, I have both of the ears sewn on here with the yarn tails coming out the top because that's where I finished sewing. And what I like to do is I will take my hook, you can also do this with a needle if your yarn needle is still on there, and I like to grab this end and pull it through. Oh, looks like I got some of my stuffing coming out there too with that. But then I go in the exact same one, and I'm gonna go over and grab this one. I'm in the exact same hole, that's what I meant to say, and pull that through. And then, because they're both coming out the same hole, I'm gonna tie those two together, and it will pull the knot down inside. And I actually like to pull it just enough, just a little bit, to cinch that in and shape his head just a little bit. Not a lot, but just a little bit. Tie that knot, double tie it, and then you can just go ahead and pull those down inside to hide them. Once you've made a second bear, you've got the cutest little set of Kissy Bears, just in time for Valentine's Day. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a nice day.